Excellent. I'm James Evans. I am the Chief Executive Officer of the Sanibel Captiva Conservation Foundation. I want to welcome you all to our program tonight, Powering Our Green Energy Future. And so our goal tonight is to have a conversation about renewable energy. And I really want to thank you all for being here tonight. And I am also the chair of our renewable energy working group that we have here on the islands, along with my colleague Bob Moore. Bob, where are you? There's Bob. Thank you, Bob. And I want to take a minute to recognize Bob Moore for elevating the conversation on renewable energy in our community, for his passion and for coordinating tonight's program. Without Bob, you wouldn't be here tonight. So thank you, Bob. I also want to thank John Lai with the Sanibel Captiva Chamber of Commerce. He's the CEO of the Chamber of Commerce. And I want to thank you, John, and the Chamber for co-hosting tonight's discussion. Thank you, John. And finally, I just want to recognize our elected officials and some of the other city officials we have in the room tonight. Vice Mayor Johnson, where are you? Thanks for being here tonight. We also have Councilman Mike Miller. Mike, where are you? Thanks for being here tonight. And finally, we have our city manager, Dana Souza. Dana, thanks for being here tonight. And the city of Sanibel has really set the bar on how local governments in Southwest Florida, and in fact, in all of Florida, of how we address a lot of our issues in our community, especially when it comes to conservation. Of course, you look around, you see what the city of Sanibel has done to protect this incredible place. And if it weren't for the city of Sanibel and the hardworking people that we have working at the city of Sanibel, and of course the comprehensive land use plan that protects it all, we wouldn't have this wonderful place here on Sanibel or the wonderful resources we have on Captiva Island as well. So thank you for all that you do, Dana and City Council, because it makes a difference. We really appreciate it. And so I just want to introduce our Renewable Energy Working Group. We have a number of our working group sitting here on our panel tonight, but we have a number of folks that aren't here tonight. And I'll just start it off with some of the representatives that are on our Renewable Energy Working Group from the city of Sanibel. We have Vice Mayor Richard Johnson. We have the Director of Natural Resources, Holly Milbrandt. And we have Environmental Specialist Joel Cowett, who I don't believe are with us tonight. Holly, anybody else? Okay, not here tonight. And with SCCF, of course, I'm the co-chair of the working group, and we also have Dr. Carrie Schumann, who's our Coastal Resilience Manager. From the Chamber of Commerce, we have John Lai. From the Ding Darling National Wildlife Refuge, we have Kevin Godsey, who's the project leader of Southwest Florida Refuge Complex, which includes 10,000 islands and a number of the other refuges. I don't think Kevin's here tonight. For the Ding Darling Wildlife Society, we have Dr. John McCabe. John, where are you? Raise your hand right there. Thank you for being here tonight. From the Committee of the Islands, we have Barbara Joy Cooley. From the Captiva Community Panel and the Captiva Erosion Prevention District, we have Linda Laird. From the Lee County Electric Co-op, we have Tricia Dorn. Tricia, where are you? Raise your hand. Thank you, Tricia. Appreciate you being here. And from Florida Gulf Coast University, we have Mike Savarese, and we also have Sim Komazar. Sim. And from Growing Climate Solutions, we have Anna Puskin-Shovlin. She's not here tonight, but she's the Regional Director of Growing Climate Solutions, and I do want to recognize Anna for all of her work that she's doing regionally. She's doing a great job of coordinating all of the communities in Southwest Florida to really bring climate change, renewable energy to the top of everyone's agenda. So thank you, Anna. If you're listening online, thank you for everything that you do. And of course, I want to thank some of our citizen volunteers. Of course, I recognized Bob Moore earlier, who's the co-chair of our working group. But again, Bob is really the person that is bringing this to the top of the community's agenda here, and I want to thank Bob for that. And also his lovely wife, Ariel Hoover, who's the chair and co-founder of Lee County Climate Reality, and Tom Birma. I don't believe Tom is here tonight, but he's a retired environmental professor, so he's been instrumental in our working group as well. And then finally, I want to thank Katie Leone. She's the Director of Corporate Social Responsibility with Hertz, so we do have some corporate partners as well. So thank you all for being partners with us on the Renewable Energy Working Group. So as a barrier island community, the impacts and costs of climate change are particularly high, especially when you consider sea level rise, storm and flooding impacts, water quality issues, and of course, ecosystem health. And there's a real need to make our community more resilient to the impacts of climate change and sea level rise. And so we have really led by example on so many fronts, from our land use planning to conservation to water quality. And this has resulted in our community preserving more than 70% of our surrounding islands for conservation, 70% of Sanibel's wild areas, and it's made a tremendous impact on our quality of life. And 70%, that's right. It's a lot of land. And, you know, of course, that has resulted in Sanibel and Captiva being an attraction for all the right reasons. Our pristine beaches, our vast natural areas, our abundant wildlife, a high quality of life, increased property values, and a great place to do business. Our work on water quality brought the environmental community together with our business community, residents, and our faith-based organizations towards a common goal of protecting our water quality, our quality of life, and our local economy. Our work on renewable energy can follow that same model, since many of the threats and impacts are the same when we consider the impacts of climate change, sea level rise, and ocean acidification on our Barrier Island communities. We have a real opportunity to be a case study for our region, just like we have been with water quality. All right, well, I'm just gonna take a quick moment to read an excerpt from our statement of purpose for a renewable energy working group. The working group seeks to complement work underway in Sanibel and Captiva and regionally by the Southwest Florida Regional Resiliency Compact on adaptation to the effects of climate change. The work anticipated by the working group will examine viable solutions to reduce greenhouse gas pollution. Is that okay? See? Can everybody see okay? All right, excellent. Reducing direct energy costs to businesses, municipalities, and residents, and increasing regional resiliency by promoting investment in electricity, in the electricity grid, electric transportation infrastructure, and energy efficiency and conservation. The goal is to reduce the long-term impacts and costs of the accelerating effects of climate change and preserve a high quality of life for current and future residents in the region. And so, as we evaluate the needs of regional resiliency planning, we tend to focus a lot on adaptation strategies, but very little has been done on the mitigation strategies. This is a slide from our vulnerability study completed in 2019 through the Florida Gulf Coast University as part of the work that Dr. Mike Savarese did with the city of Sanibel, showing the process of how we make our communities more resilient. And our goal tonight will be to focus on the mitigation component and what our community can do to address the sources of carbon and how we can reduce greenhouse gases and move our community towards a greater dependence on renewable energy. We recognize that this will not be done overnight. It will be done in incremental steps as new technology emerges in a fiscally responsible way, as our community likes to do things, and as the return on investment continues to improve. So the goals of our program tonight are to, one, provide context and a background on the topic from our working group members, and of course you're going to hear from many of those tonight. We want to present the working group's initial recommendations for near and longer term solutions to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and save on energy costs. And finally, we want to hear feedback from you, the community, and have a discussion with you. We want to have this as a discussion, not a debate. We're here to talk about the merits of renewable energy, not debate the aspects of climate change. Of course, we want to have a robust conversation, but we're pretty sure that the scientific debate is over. There may still be a political debate, but we're pretty confident that moving forward, we need to focus on how we implement renewables, not come up with excuses why we don't need to implement renewable resources. And so our agenda for tonight, our working group is made up of a group of various people with various talents, and tonight we have 4 panelists from our working group who will be covering a number of different topics. First, we have Dr. Carrie Schumann here on my left. She's our Coastal Resilience Manager at Sanibel Captiva Conservation Foundation, or SCCF, and she'll be presenting a climate change primer, what coastal communities can expect and why greenhouse gas reduction is critical. Next, we have Dr. Sim Komazar, Environmental Engineering Program Director at Florida Gulf Coast University. Sim will be discussing energy auditing, a first step towards energy efficiency and employing renewables. Next, we've got John Lai, CEO of the Chamber of Commerce, and John will be discussing why Florida businesses are focused on climate change resiliency. And finally, we've got Bob Moore, who will conclude with establishing a starting point and a future vision, recommendations from the working group. So tonight we are also, let's see, for the questions and answering session, before I get into this slide here, let me just back up. So for the Q&A portion of tonight's program, at the end of the program, you will have an opportunity to participate in the discussion. We will have a microphone available right there in the back. Hopefully you all can see that. And you'll be able to come up there and ask a question when we get to the end. We ask that you please limit your questions or statements to 2 minutes so that we can keep the flow of conversation going. And if you are attending virtually, please type your questions into the Q&A feature in the Zoom, and we will read your question out loud, and the panel will have an opportunity to answer any questions that you present through Zoom. We will also be using a tool called AHA Slides, and on the name tag that you have right there, there's a QR code, or you can scan that QR code on the screen there. It'll take you to a website where you'll have an opportunity to answer a series of survey questions that you'll be able to actually see the data as it comes through. So if you wouldn't mind, let's just take a minute, pull out your smartphone, and use your phone to scan that QR code or scan the QR code on your name tag. And if you're unfamiliar, just let me know. Everybody clear on what I'm saying here? All right, excellent. All right, so once the link comes up, go ahead and click on it. And it takes you to a website where you can participate in each of the survey questions. Is everybody there? Excellent. It's great to hear. I love when technology works. All right, so once you get to the website, please answer the first survey question. And I'm going to bring that up in just a second here. All right. What's that? All right, fantastic. Well, thank you. All right, so the question is, where do you spend most of the year? So far, looks like Sanibel or Captiva. The Southeast, Western Mountain States. All right, looks like Sanibel or Captiva is dominating. There's a lot of love for tonight, it looks like. Some likes. All right, so it looks like everybody can use the AHA app. You passed your first test. Great work. Oh, we're not going to answer that question, so what I'm going to do now is we're going to make a quick transition here. All right. So I want to invite our first panelist, Dr. Carrie Schumann from the Sanibel Captiva Conservation Foundation. Carrie?
So hello, everybody. So it sounds like I've already had my introduction, so I'm going to dive in here. And really what I want to do with my talk is to give you some of the larger context to let us think about why tools like energy efficiency and renewable energy is really important in terms of thinking about our future adaptation strategy to climate change. And so the first thing I want to do is I really want to anchor the following ideas against the backdrop of coastal resilience. And the reason being is because coastal resilience is sort of that framework, it's the language that we've been using to talk about a lot of issues, these issues across the state at different scales. And I really like this definition from NOAA. NOAA is the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. And they describe coastal resilience as the ability to overcome or bounce back from disturbance. And it's an idea that really applies to the human side of our system. So we can think about our visitors, our residents here. It applies to our community as a whole, to our associated infrastructure, and to our natural systems. But when we think about what are we talking about when we talk about those disturbances, well, really what we're talking about is current and future impacts of climate change. Now, I'm going to talk through a few of these. This is not an exhaustive list, but what this does do is highlight some things that are particularly important for us as barrier island communities. And I do want to make the point that this top impact here, this idea of temperature, it's really important because not only is it an impact, but it's really a core key driver for these other three impacts. And we can think about hurricanes, precipitation patterns, and sea level rise are often collected under the single umbrella of coastal flooding risks. And I'm also really going to bring in some data to start to understand what is our local story, what can we expect in our region. So if we look first at heat, so one way we can think about heat is we could look at the number of days that are going to feel really hot to us. And so what we could look at here is we're looking at the number of days that are under the heat index of 90 degrees or above. This is developed for Congressional District 19, but we're part of that. And if you were to look at Lee County, you'd see very similar numbers. But what you can see, what's really important here is that you can see a trend. We know that we already have days that feel hot to us. But what the trend suggests is that we're going to see more of those hot days. One really important thing to also make note of, however, that I want to circle back to in a little bit is this idea that last column to the right, it has this idea of limiting warming and being able to decrease that impact. And so that's something I really want to circle back to. What are hurricanes going to do? Well, hurricanes, one really important thing to know about hurricanes is they're really fueled by warm, moist air. And there's a particular location where hurricanes tend to occur. I'm just going to get my little pointer up here. Okay. And so hurricanes tend to occur in the equatorial band that you can see on this figure. So places where the water is about 80 degrees Fahrenheit or above. As we see sea surface temperatures rise, as we see air temperatures rise, what it does is it gives those hurricanes more fuel. So what does that really translate into? Well, what we are not sure of, scientists are not really sure what happens to the total number of hurricanes. But what we should expect is that we are going to see more hurricanes of increased intensity. And you can actually see that in this figure. So more intense hurricanes that are denoted in yellow, you can see over time that that yellow portion of the bar is taking up a larger proportion of the total over a given time period. The other thing is to think about the fact that if you combine that with, we're starting to see hurricanes not decay as quickly over land. And when you combine those two pieces, you really need to think about the fact that we now have to think about how we deal with increased storm surge, with increased wind and wave energy. In terms of rainfall for us, it's a little tricky to predict trends for rainfall because we have very variable patterns in the state already. But we likely will follow global trends that at least suggest that we're going to see wetter wets, drier dries. And I think for Sanibel, one of the things that we need to think about is if we have an increase in heavier rain events, which we can expect with that pattern, is we then need to think about increased storm capacity or stormwater capacity. And then the last impact is this idea of sea level rise. And sea level rise, as compared to the two previous impacts are episodic. Sea level rise is a little different in that it's gradual and it unfolds slowly over time. And right now what you're seeing is data that's pulled from data from NOAA that was released in February and from NOAA and their partners. And this also pulls in information from our local tidal gauge. But one thing that you'll notice is it's actually represented as what I would call a series of possible futures, right? So what these do is these give us a rough approximate range of what we might expect for sea level rise over time. So for example, if you were to look at the year 2050, what you would see is a range roughly a little bit below a foot to about 1.5 feet. So the question you might have is what's going on? Why are there a suite of potential futures? So the reason being is because this incorporates a couple levels of uncertainty. It incorporates a little uncertainty about how the science and how we understand those physical drivers, but we are improving with our ability to understand that. The February data from NOAA really includes a better understanding of how ice sheets contribute to this. But the other piece is that we have uncertainty around our actions and how those contribute to the greenhouse gas emissions that cause temperature that's underpinning some of these flooding risks. And I'll come back to that idea in just a little bit here. this is the part where we talk about, so what? So why do I care about this? So heat can have a lot of ramifications, but I'm just going to give you a couple ideas that are specific to Sanibel and Captiva. So first of all, we know that we have some vulnerable populations here that we need to think about those heat impacts, those health impacts. So we know that we have a really important outdoor worker population here. We also know that we have a really vibrant and important senior population here, and both those are populations that are really important and really vulnerable to heat. Another thing is to think about our tourism. So if you have days that feel really hot, what that could mean is maybe we see a shift in when people visit, or we might have a decrease on those days that are just too hot to feel comfortable to be out and about. We have environmental impacts that we care about. So James made a really good point about that balance that we have here. There's a really unique balance with our ecosystems that are contributing to our economic outcomes, that are contributing to our quality of life. And so they're not immune to these potential impacts either. And so what could those look like for our natural systems? We could see a loss or a change of habitat and wildlife. And so an example of what that might look like is we could have these more inland freshwater systems might start to convert to more saltwater dominated systems. We could see loss of biodiversity. Invasive species, the reason they're invasive and do really well is they take advantage of changing conditions. So it may be that as we see these changing impacts, these changing conditions, that we see certain kinds of invasive species getting a stronger foothold here. And we know that we care about water quality. That's something that a lot of folks here are really engaged with. And so, changing temperatures can lead to a backdrop of, increased events that we might not want to see. So potentially the backdrop for more harmful algal blooms. And what does this look like? What does the flooding part of things look like for us? So I want to give you a couple notes about this. So what these maps are, they're from the NOAA Sea Level Rise Viewer. And there's a couple things to know about this. So first of all, what these introduce you to is the idea of where you might see water in the future. And when I say where you'll see water, it doesn't mean to expect water there all the time, but this is flooding that you would see with the highest high tides. The other thing to think about with these maps is they don't show you the compounding of multiple flood risks. So you could have sea level rise, but this is not going to show you what happens when you have that storm come in and you get that additional storm surge. But just to orient you, on the left, that's Sanibel and Captiva. That's sort of the current state of things. On the right, that's what a foot of sea level rise looks like. Based on those possible futures, we could expect that kind of level of sea level rise between about 2040 and 2060. Now switching to what 2 feet of sea level rise looks like. Now we're, again, thinking about those possible futures. We're thinking about a timeline roughly 2060 to about 2100. And so I think, there's a couple key things that you can see right away. First, we know that our bayside is an area that's particularly vulnerable for our islands. And I think this really pinpoints that we really are going to have to think about water differently and think about how we manage water.
So is the light blue the sea level rise?
Yes. So again, this doesn't give you a scale bar, but this at least gives you a rough sense of where we might see water where we're not seeing water now. Okay? And now here's the really important part. Here's where we start to tie this together. So what is it that we can do to respond to all these impacts? And I think much like James sort of set this up, which was really great, was the idea that we talk about resilience a lot across the state, and we talk a lot about adaptation, which is thinking about those solutions that we can use to really respond to these impacts, and that might mean using our natural systems to our advantage, but a lot of times mitigation is not making it into the conversation. And it's really important so if we think about problem solving, a lot of times it's really good problem solving to not just treat symptoms, but to also treat causes. And so you want to have equal parts of both of these. And so what does that really mean? Really the link here that we care about is greenhouse gases. And so greenhouse gases, they're a natural part of our environment. They're in our atmosphere. What they really do is they have an insulating effect for us. They trap heat that would normally be redirected away from the earth, and that's something that we want to have, right? But the issue is that we're essentially contributing too much too fast. This is really a rate kind of issue. And so really any kind of actions that we can do to decrease our future rate of emissions, that's going to be incredibly important. okay? And so I think it's important to note here, so this shows you the kinds of warming that are correlated with those types of emissions. And so you can see, here's again, your possible futures. So we have a future where we have a lot more warming if we don't respond to any of these emissions, and then we can significantly tamp down that level of warming if we are able to respond to those emissions. And we can have, this is where we start to really tie in that energy idea. So I really want you to focus on the right. And what that shows you is that shows you emissions in Florida. And one of the things that you can see, a really large part of that pie, almost 38%, is associated with our energy generation. So if we can think about our energy options like our renewables, like energy efficiency, that result in less emissions, we can start to make that piece of the pie smaller. Okay? Which really means we can end up in a better place with these future scenarios, okay? And because temperature is a really core driver for some of these other impacts, we can end up in a better place with an impact like sea level rise. So instead of saying it's inevitable that we travel this highest track, we have the ability to expect to travel some of these lower tracks. And if we're able to lessen some of those impacts, that necessarily means that we're going to have more successful adaptation efforts. And so with that being said, that's all I have to share with you. But now we're going to transition to another question to get some of your ideas.
All right. All right, pull out your smartphones. And let's, it's not letting me, there we go. All right. Scan the QR codes for those of you that came in after we announced this. There's a QR code on your name tag. You can go ahead and scan that. It'll take you to a website called AHA Slides. You can go to AHA Slides and you'll be able to answer the survey questions here. Looks like many of you are already doing that. So the question is, so those of you that are not participating, is which of these impacts of climate change are you most concerned about? So far it looks like impacts on harmful algal blooms and water quality is winning. Sea level rise. It is. I have 80 to 1 odds on heat and human health. Well, I'm glad no one's not concerned. And by the way, this data is going to be used by our team. Of course, we're recording this session on Zoom, but we're also going to use this data as we deliberate after this meeting with our renewable energy group. So thank you for participating in collecting this data. All right, it looks like sea level rise and storm surge are the winners, but impacts on harmful algal blooms and water quality is a close third. All right, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sim.
Good evening. Sim Commissar. I'm the Program Director of Environmental Engineering at Florida Gulf Coast University. I've done quite a lot of work on renewable energy and in particular about energy efficiency. And that's what I'll focus on tonight. Don't worry, there will not be a quiz afterwards. The facts are relatively hard to ignore. As Dr. Schumann showed us, heat, water, wind, sea level rise, changing flora and fauna, climate migration, we're seeing that around the world, and the list goes on. We feel that in our pocketbooks. Our insurance rates have gone through the roof. Electricity costs are going up, city services, sanitation. the International Panel on Climate Change says we need to do something now. It's especially important for Florida, and it's especially important for us who are concerned about places like Sanibel. Common sense says let's address the root of the problem, not just try and put a Band-Aid on the symptoms of the problem. We need to recognize what our needs are, what's possible, and what's practical. And in particular, and I think John will echo this coming up, sustainable solutions aren't sustainable if they don't make economic sense. So there are opportunity cost savings through effective energy use in a really big way. First and foremost, the lowest cost energy unit is the one we don't use. So if we can save energy, we save money. Obviously, there's lots of low-hanging fruit. We can replace a lot of older technology with more efficient approaches. Many of you probably have heat pumps at your house as your primary way of cooling. And that's amazing technology. And newer heat pumps are getting even better and better. One of the things we use is something called a coefficient of performance. Some heat pumps now have a COP of greater than 4, which is really, really remarkable. But it's not the only thing we can do. There are efficiency measures that translate directly into dollars and savings, not only for city or municipal buildings, but commercial buildings and residential buildings as well. We're looking at projects that can have a return on investment of between 1.5 to 8 years, and with a useful life of something like 25 years. So there's an enormous economic opportunity out there. 30% of the energy lost is in the buildings that we occupy, right? And there are lots of reasons for that. Some of them are really obvious. We don't have good ductwork. We don't have enough insulation in our buildings. We have windows that are single pane or faulty. We have old faulty wiring. We have poorly designed entranceways. We lose a lot of energy when we open the door, and it doesn't immediately shut. Incandescent lighting is inefficient. All those things. Simple stuff, poor landscaping, not enough shading. We know that. But not only these technical aspects, but also behavioral aspects can be really important. For example, demand management. So, and I hear the LCEC people in the back starting to clap, right? When we use energy and when we put our maximum demand out there has a big impact. So if we're smarter about when we cool, when we choose not to cool, there's a big opportunity for savings. And there are other simple behavioral things. If you have any children, you know these. Don't take a 25-minute shower. Don't leave the window open. All those basic common sense things. Florida has real challenges, somewhat different than other parts of the country. For example, we not only control temperature with our air conditioning, but we also control humidity, right? And that's a big deal. One of the projects I've been working on at FGCU, for example, is the fact that we have a closed loop chiller system, and we actually efficiently cool down our buildings. And we do such a good job that actually our electric bills are highest in the winter. Why? Because we have to run the cooling in order to keep the humidity low in the building, and then we have to reheat the air, right, in order to make the building actually comfortable to use. So there are interesting technical problems. We have a transient population that may not want to invest. Politics, push that to one side. And there's also the idea that energy is an inelastic thing, kind of like water. There's a certain amount that we need, and we're willing to pay whatever price for that. Those of us who are lucky enough to have resources don't really feel the impact of rising energy costs. But there are members or parts of our population, seniors in particular on fixed incomes, who really face hardship when the cost of energy goes up. So how do we get started? Well, the first thing that we need to do is understand where we are, right? And we think of that in terms of benchmarking. We want to be able to identify buildings that are less than efficient and try and fix those. In other words, reduce demand before we increase supply of alternative energy. Efficiency measures really work, and we can do this in low-cost ways. So, inventorying a lot of our buildings, finding out how much energy they use, what kind of technology is in operation, whether there are seasonal or temporal variations that we can look at. We can then compare those buildings to national averages or similar types of buildings in similar communities. Only then can we begin to explore whether or not we can add additional energy on top of that, right? So reduce demand first, then increase supply. This makes sense also in terms of the overall resilience of a place like Sanibel. As we do this, we can begin to examine, for example, our electric grid. Can we upgrade that at the same time and make that harder, more resistant to impacts from things like big storms? So looking at costs, benefits, and return on investment is really important. And we can use all kinds of metrics, not only just the amount of energy used. We can translate that into dollars saved. We can translate that into greenhouse gas emissions. We can use all those metrics at once. What we have in abundance in Florida is solar. Those of you who have put solar hot water know how rapidly the return on that investment is. If you have a pool heater in particular, that's a big deal. But solar photovoltaics are really the future. And we've got lots of rooftops, parking lots, stormwater retention ponds. We don't need to put solar panels necessarily on conservation lands, right? We want to conserve those for what they are, but we can use available footprints to increase our supply of solar energy. The little chart over here on the right-hand side shows you the incredible progress that's been made over the last even 10 to 15 years. The cost of solar panels has dropped so that it is now the least cost option for increasing electricity supply. It's better than natural gas. It's equivalent to, or maybe even slightly better than wind. The return on investment for commercial rooftop installations is something like 4 to 6 years. Companies like Walmart are going all in on this, right? Their pledge and their goal is to get all of their electric supply from rooftop solar. In addition, the cost of battery storage and the incredible technological advancements that are going on have really accelerated. It's an exciting time. Okay, thermal solar, we're just heating hot water directly, right? You'll often see panels on roofs that basically look like little plastic pipes, right? And we're directly heating that water with sunlight. And then we're using that water preheated, if you will, for our hot water needs. In particular, heating your pool up or even piping that into your hot water tank. Right, so directly using the sun to heat the hot water versus photovoltaic, where we're using the sunlight to create electricity. Sure. So moving forward, we avoid fossil fuel costs. We're looking at really changing the way we think about resiliency and adaptation planning. Solar with battery backup supports the functioning of essential services during a crisis. Water, sewer, fire, police, city government. And changing or updating our grid system that's connected to solar and storage enables a broader community to function when the grid goes down. And there's a pilot project right now that FPL is doing over on the East Coast with Florida International University, looking at creating a series of microgrids that will be very resistant to any kind of insult like a major hurricane. Right now, well, we've got LCEC people in here. They're the people we need to talk to. Right now, we have a major power line coming on to Sanibel that also feeds to Captiva. That it will take a whole lot of input and working together. I think that it is possible, sure. What the cost will be, how we will implement it, those are questions that we will need to address. So what our working group is coming up with in terms of ideas is to go inexpensively at first, right? Don't just jump in and throw a whole lot of money around, but try and use simple tools. And in particular, we've got a whole generation of talent out there wanting to get involved. My students are chomping at the bit for fun projects to work on. And getting them to help us inexpensively audit what we have, begin this benchmarking process, understand what's possible, that's the way forward. Then and only then do we start to actually make larger scale investments, more expensive investments in upgraded technology, adding additional sources of energy, working on changing our grid. All right, so we've got our next aha.
All right, pull out your phones. Great job, Sim. All right, for those of you that can't see your phones, it says, which green energy solutions do you think make sense for Sanibel and Captiva? And this will be a word cloud, so the answer that gets the item that gets the most will be the largest on the screen. You guys were paying attention during the last presentation. Looks like solar has it. Excellent. Well, it looks like solar has it, and I want to thank you all in the room, those of you that responded to our call to action to ask Governor DeSantis to veto House Bill 741. Thank you all, because it was vetoed. It was a success, this legislative session. So thank you very much. We really appreciate it. All right, our next speaker is John Lai, and John will be talking about climate change resiliency and the business community. What's at stake?
Impressive. Thanks, James. I did tell James that I would make up for the time that the other speakers went over, so I'm done. Everyone, thank you very much. No, I'm kidding. But I did promise him I'd stick to my script because I do tend to go over, and I will not do that today. But before I do that, I just want to thank you, James, for inviting us in the Chamber to co-sponsor this event with you tonight. I think one of the things that I've said quite frequently over the last several years as my term as Chamber President and CEO has been that this community is special for a lot of reasons. The one that sticks out the most to me is that it gives us the opportunity as a business community, and it's very rare, and I don't think I can overstate that, that a business community, a residential community, and a conservation community can come together and work towards a common cause. It's very rare that you'll see an event like this happen tonight between a chamber and the Conservation Foundation of any other community other than this one. So, James, thank you for your leadership at SCCF, and Bob, thanks for your, we call it persistence, right? Persistence in helping us put this together. We did this over a season, and it was challenging, but it was worth it, and it was a conversation that has to happen. So, sticking to the script as I promised. My name is John Lai. For those of you I've not had the pleasure of meeting, I'm a Visit Florida board member. I'm a board member of the Florida Restaurant Lodging Association, and I'm the chair of the Florida Chamber Association of Chamber Professionals. But there is no prouder privilege that I have than serving as the Sanibel Captiva Chamber of Commerce President and CEO. I've been there for just over 5 years, and more than a little bit intimidated when I was asked to sit on this panel. And as you've heard already, there's great reason why. Once again, though, I know the importance of having this conversation in this room tonight, and I'm here to make a business case for exactly what we just heard from our previous speakers. 10 years ago, it was almost, you never heard the words climate change come out of someone from a chamber's mouth. And I'll tell you, looking back at that, you just knew that that the business community was going to have to, at some point, wake up and smell the coffee. Because recently, what we've seen is a very dramatic shift where clean energy and climate are now everyday conversations in the business and policy worlds. Climate change is now recognized as a threat to our economy and the way of life by most Americans, including some of the most conservative businesses in the country. And the emerging focus on environmental, social, and government standards by businesses of all sizes represents a shift in corporate values that is proving to be far more than a trend, an opportunity and a great opportunity to engage businesses on new levels. So with Visit Florida in 2021, they were lobbying very hard to get their organization reapproved, reauthorized for a number of years forward. And what we did was we surveyed residents of Florida to gauge their sentiment of what living in a tourism-driven state does to enhance or detract their quality of life. I know everyone in the room has an opinion of tourists, particularly in January, February, and March, but we wanted to see what that sentiment was. We learned a lot from the survey, and we know we have some things to work on. We have some education to do within our business community and within our residential community. But we were very happy to see the way that this particular question was answered. I personally feel very strongly that without a strong tourism contribution to our state coffers, that a state income tax would undoubtedly exist. So this slide here has not yet been updated, but we did come in at just over $30 million for the fourth quarter of 2021, making that the strongest calendar year on record for domestic visitation. And what you'll notice is that we missed Q1 because the vaccine had not yet been fully rolled out. So in 3 quarters, we beat our best year entirely with domestic visitation. And that drove just about every metric last year was domestic, because we all know that, that overseas visitation was still very, very slow last year, with a lot of the borders still being closed. And once again, this slide has not yet been updated, but obviously in Q4, we saw much stronger numbers than we did in Q1, Q2, or Q3. With these international visitors, what we do see are much longer stays and more ground covered throughout the state. So they may start in Orlando, work their way over to Fort Myers and Sanibel, and then head down south to Miami, then go back to Orlando and fly out of there. Why they wouldn't just stay here the whole time is beyond me, but by show of hands, how many of you visited Florida as a vacationer before you decided to buy land here on Sanibel? And that is very common, right? We know that that people find that this is a great place to live by visiting here, our destination first. This slide represents exactly what's at stake for just our Southwest Florida community in residential home values. And we know that these are 2021 numbers, and everyone in this room is well aware of what's happened since these numbers were pulled. I'm willing to bet that number's almost doubled now. And so you're looking at $350 billion in January 2021 of just those 5 counties of total market value for housing stock. And then you're looking at over $31 billion in revenue for residential sales in 2021, or I'm sorry, over $30 billion. So these aren't numbers to take lightly. And we know that these, every single one of these homes are impacted by that slide that Carrie showed earlier that shows potential sea level rise. So what's at stake? Some pretty big numbers. Already did that. Another great example of why we're very fortunate to live in Florida. We have RSW, which is Southwest Florida International Airport, in our backyard, and these numbers are complete. 2021 was a record year for that airport, and we know that they are doing more and more expansion even this year as we speak. So with more flights coming in, with more international travelers coming in, that number equates to probably a 20% increase. What we'll see in 2022, will be roughly a 20% increase from what we saw in 2020 and 2021. So in 2021. So we're looking forward to that. We're excited about it, but we also know that represents Lee, Charlotte, Collier counties, and some outside of that as well. Now for some good news. Believe it or not, Florida is one of the country's leading states for clean energy jobs. We rank 4th overall in the nation. Prior to 2020 and the coronavirus pandemic, clean energy jobs had increased 34% since 2013. And fortunately, many of the jobs in 2020 have since returned. Specifically, Florida is top 3 state for number of electronic vehicles, which has spurred many state-level efforts to expand EV charging networks. And the chambers of commerce around the country are helping to spearhead that effort. Additionally, Florida has the 3rd most solar energy installed nationwide. I think some of you just touched on that, and we are the Sunshine State after all. The 2nd most solar jobs, and has attracted billions of dollars in solar investment. Florida is projected to have the 3rd highest development of solar energy over the next 5 years, which will create even more jobs and significant local and state taxes and attract billions more in capital investment. Specifically, Florida is the top 3 state of the number of EVs. Oh, sorry, I already said that. But once again, we're looking at the number of dollars invested and the number right there, 39.7 million in annual property, state, and local taxes paid in Florida via renewable energy projects. So this makes not just responsible sense for us as humans, but economic sense for us as well. All too often, conversations about the environment focus solely on the threats to our planet. But protecting and repairing the environment is not just good news for our world, it's good news for the American worker as well. With the passage of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act at the end of 2021, we know that most of the new infrastructure is being designed or built with climate resilience in mind. And with that comes the potential for massive job creation. This is a slide that you will likely not be able to read, but I'll help you out with it. it shows some responses to different climate change impacts in terms to visitation intentions. And it's particularly important for the visitation slides that I went through earlier. And now that I've shared those numbers that the tourism and real estate economic number reflect in our county, here are some of the threats to that very industry related to the cost of doing nothing. So basically, according to a Forbes survey, well, I'll read this first, actually, sorry. Tropical diseases become more widespread. Streets are frequently flooded as a result of rain or tidal surge. Beaches largely disappear. Storms intensify throughout the year. Temperature becomes uncomfortably hot to me, which we talked about earlier. Rainfall daily duration becomes uncomfortable to me. Wind strength becomes uncomfortable to me. Marine wildlife largely disappears. Corals severely bleach. Cloud cover becomes uncomfortable to me. And all of this is being impacted right now throughout our state in one way or another. And we're seeing a lot of these here on Sanibel, Captiva, and throughout Lee County. And now for a great local case study. Well, I actually didn't. Bob helped with this one. Yeah, I didn't ask for permission, did I? So I want to blame Bob. But what we want to focus on right now is the beautiful solar panels on top of Bailey's. His first solar installation was back in 2015, and they reached a total return on investment in just under 5 years. So I think you said 4 to 6. I could have stolen that from you, but I didn't. Phase 2, he said, brought them up to 480 solar panels in total, and they anticipate a similar ROI timeframe. So is there a case for businesses to do this? Absolutely, 100%. Quoting Richard Johnson, our results in a heavy consumer commercial environment may not be representative to other installations. I strongly recommend using a qualified solar consulting firm as you make your decision. So I asked him to elaborate on that some more, and his exact words were, it's complicated. So once again, I'll read right off his email. Solar is a component of our kilowatt diet. Kilowatts are a measure of energy, and food provides our bodies with energy. So the name has ties back to our family business, which, as you all know, he's a grocer. We have cut our monthly electrical costs by approximately 2/3 by following our kilowatt diet. We used doored retail cases, replaced all of our water heaters with heat recovery systems, LED lighting retrofit throughout the store, including Bailey's Center, common areas, and preventive maintenance on refrigeration system and HVAC. This was all done in preparation for our solar panel generation system. All of these changes and improvements are components of our kilowatt diet. Since energy is a large variable cost, consider factoring this into your cost structure. CEOs tend to be more vision-driven, while CFOs will want to see that renewable energy numbers make sense. But either way, I would personally encourage all businesses in Florida to show their leadership team what the proposed renewable energy projects will do for their bottom line. I'll leave you with this. Making eco-conscious business decisions today will drive growth, create long-term value, and safeguard future profitability for your organization. When businesses demonstrate the value of renewable energy to your leadership, they can begin building an energy plan that will create a better future for your business and the planet. Thank you.
Well, clearly you can see renewables make good business sense. So thank you, John and Sim, for that economic information, really helpful. And thank you, Bailey's, for leading by example. Those are the wins that we need to get on the board in our community so that people continue to embrace renewables, not just because it's the right thing to do and it's good for our environment, but because it makes good economic sense. So thank you. All right, pull your smartphones out. We're gonna make this a quick one so I can save Bob another minute in his presentation. Otherwise, I gotta cut him. All right, as a consumer, I would feel positively about purchasing from a business that invests in energy efficiency and/or renewable energy. Got some disagrees, at least one. Always got to be different. All right, looks like we got a lot of love for that one. So we got 37, 39 that agree. Hurry up, those of you that haven't answered. Move on to presentation. It's not me. All right, our next presentation will be by Bob Moore, recommendations from the Sanibel Captiva Renewable Energy Working Group. Bob?
So as James said, I'm here to represent the broader working group, which I've had the privilege of co-chairing over the last year or so. And I'm happy to have been very happy to see that there's been a lot of interest in this topic across the community, from the chamber, from local nonprofits, from the city, and from our utility, LCEC. In fact, I'd like to give a call out to the folks from LCEC who are here to support the event tonight. They've been extremely supportive of this conversation, and we really appreciate that. Now, yeah, thank you. Sanibel and Captiva, we're clearly not gonna solve the global climate crisis here on our little islands, right? But we do have an opportunity to provide needed leadership to the region, and to bring some near-term and long-term benefits directly here to our community. So as a working group, we recognize the importance of reducing harmful emissions to reduce the future impacts of climate change, but we've also had a very practical, near-term focus in our discussions so far. So as you'll hear in our initial recommendations, we think that the city of Sanibel and Sanibel Captiva businesses and homeowners should prioritize good returns on investment as a starting place as we look to the future. And this is a long-term project we're looking to kick off here. Clearly, I think we all understand that fossil fuels are deeply embedded in all aspects of our lives and our economy. But science is telling us the clock is ticking. So let's dive in. In this section, I'll take you on a brief visual tour of what a green energy future could look like here and what some of the benefits could be. And I'll end by presenting recommendations from the working group, which we think provide a good common sense starting point for making future decisions. And we'd like to hear what you think about them too. So let me start by recapping a couple of key points for context. Carrie's section made clear that resiliency requires both adaptation to climate change and mitigation to reduce its future impacts. And in my mind, this slide says it all. In 100 years, we could see sea level rise of 6 to 12 feet if we continue under a business as usual scenario. We just really can't adapt our way out of that. We need to change the trajectory to be on the low end of this forecast. We also can't afford not to do something about this. In this one example, we've seen costs from billion-dollar storm events increase 8-fold in just the last 40 years, and we can expect that bill to continue to rise. So as John pointed out, this conversation is also about our economic resiliency. And fortunately, there's now alignment between the need for renewables and the economic case for their adoption. The cost of renewables have been plummeting, as you heard Sim say. Wind and solar are already the cheapest sources of new electricity generation in 2/3 of the world and will be globally in every market in the not too distant future. The same thing's happening with electric vehicles. We're almost at the crossing point where EVs with similar ranges to combustion engine cars will be cheaper, and they're already cheaper to maintain. So the technology is there. It's ready for us to make changes if we can muster the will. And as Sim pointed out, there's potentially a lot of dollars to save just from using energy more efficiently. I wanted to put this slide up again quickly because as we look to solutions, we know that here in Florida, transportation and electricity account for nearly 80% of our greenhouse gas emissions. So it only makes sense to focus on those areas first. So welcome to Sanibel Captiva. Let's take a quick tour of a potential future. What are some of the ways that we could become a green energy community? What could things look like 5, 10, 20 years down the line? To start, as Sim said, the cheapest and most efficient energy is the energy that's never used. So can we save energy and taxpayer money just by improving building efficiency and energy use practices? I spoke to a leader in the city of Orlando that's been putting a lot of attention on this over the last 5 years. And he shared with me 3 building projects that were similar in scope to something we may consider here, saving energy cost and use between 15 and 34% in these recent examples. Once we do that, what are all the ways we can have the city and the broader community save money with solar and gain more energy independence? City buildings with rooftop solar installations, floating solar. Using ponds for panels supports land conservation, and the cooling effect of water actually makes the panels more efficient. Shading from the panels can reduce unwanted algal blooms. Can you imagine these on water treatment ponds here or as part of cleanup efforts on local bayous? In upstate New York, in a city of about 17,000 people, they were able to produce 100% of their city's municipal building electricity needs with floating solar, and they did it with federal dollars. Why not here? How about parking lots? How many of you circle the lot looking for that one shady spot? But what if all of them were shaded? And we're also generating the energy to power the business you're visiting or to power the charger for your electric vehicle, and also, again, conserving land space. Can we make solar easier and more affordable for businesses, nonprofits, and homeowners through incentives in the building code, solar co-ops, or creative funding? In our home, pictured at the bottom here, we're going to have a return on our investment in just 8 years. And over the lifetime of the system, we'll save more than twice what it costs us to put in the solar. How about schools? Here's an example from Pinellas County where they worked with the utility to install solar plus batteries to make a local microgrid, which can work independently from the larger grid. So the school system doubles as a hurricane shelter and can provide safe power during storms. It also helps to stabilize the grid during normal times by storing power that can be used to tapped to manage peak demand. And it supports the school STEM curriculum. And I love this example in Arkansas where the savings moved the school finances from deficit to surplus, and there was still enough left over to give teachers a raise. Again, shouldn't we be doing that here? And here's an example perfectly suited to our Barrier Island community that Sim was talking about. Microgrid technology can really advance our resiliency planning as a longer-term investment, working in collaboration with our utility. Building solar-powered microgrids with battery backup can help us to continue to keep essential services functioning when the grid is down, which we know from experience in extreme storms can be days or even weeks. Police, fire, water, city operations, key businesses, these systems can all operate with no interruption in emergency services without concern for transporting diesel or propane or the dirty emissions that come with those. And again, they can support grid reliability and cost savings during normal times. And that's why the US military is really leading on this, putting solar microgrids into their military bases in place of diesel generators. And what about cars? Imagine what a difference it would make to get a sizable majority of vehicles coming onto our islands to be emissions-free. We can merge solar technology with EV chargers throughout the community. We can clean up tailpipe emissions while saving money on fuel and maintenance on our city fleet. And we all know that traffic is a terrible problem we need creative solutions to address. Can we find ways to think outside the box to reduce traffic without reducing the number of visitors for local businesses? And as one final example in our green energy community, imagine if we could eliminate all the noise and air pollution from gas-powered landscaping equipment and establish ourselves as a landscaping green zone with quieter, cleaner neighborhoods. So these are just some examples to whet our imaginations. There's many more, but let's just end by talking dollars and cents a little bit. Now, with a hypothetical, this is a hypothetical example, but with an electric bill for the city of $50,000 a year and annual cost increases for electricity, we'd be facing a $600,000 price tag over 10 years. If we cut energy use by 30% through efficiency measures and produce just 50% of remaining electricity needs through solar, we'd save about $350,000 in the first 10 years of this example, and more than 900,000 over 20 years. And this is hypothetical, but it begins to demonstrate how we can do well financially by doing good for the environment. That's really the key point of these examples. And if you're like me and you have kids and grandkids, we can do these things and know we're passing less of a burden onto future generations. So I hope these examples are helpful to spark our collective imaginations. Making a transition to renewables has a lot of both near-term and long-term benefits. And that brings us to the recommendations this working group has presented to the City of Sanibel and submitted to the Captiva Community Panel as a place to get started. And tonight, again, we hope to hear more from comments from you as well. As I mentioned, these present a simple and common sense starting point. They begin by recognizing energy use as a strategic priority, part and parcel of our overall resiliency planning. Then it's all about gathering data, so we know which projects have the best return on investment and to be able to measure progress over time. The first part of that is an energy audit of city facilities and transportation fleet. And by the way, businesses and homeowners can do this too with free help from LCEC. Check out their staff and table after the event if you didn't get to talk to them ahead of time. The second part of the data collection is to conduct a greenhouse gas inventory study to give us a broader baseline to measure future progress. And both of these things, by the way, can be done at very low cost. Finally, we recommend establishing a planning committee to review the data once it's in and recommend projects that will produce cost savings to the city and other high energy users in the community. These recommendations set a foundation for empirical future planning and policy decisions. By emphasizing the economic benefits of greenhouse gas mitigation and identifying projects that can produce near-term cost savings, we believe we can take actions that not only benefit Sanibel and Captiva, but can also provide a use case to other communities in the region to follow similar actions. It's really going to take all hands on deck. So I'll end on a provocative question. Cities around the country have set goals to power their communities with renewable energy. Should Sanibel and Captiva be next? Thank you.
Excellent, thank you, Bob. And John Lyle, let me put us 5 minutes over time, so we're doing okay. All right, if you want to go ahead and pull up the app again, we'll do one, I believe, one last question here. All right, next question is, our strategic priorities for future planning should include the following. Check all that apply. A little slow tonight. There we go.
It says check all, but you can only check 4.
And while we're waiting for the data to come in, just a reminder, this Wednesday, the City of Sanibel will be having a town hall meeting to present the results of their strategic planning session. So make sure that you attend that and provide input to the City of Sanibel. 6 o'clock? Is that correct? Yes, 6 o'clock on Friday. I'm sorry, on Wednesday. 6 o'clock on Wednesday. And then it'll be right here in the community house. All right, excellent. I'm not going to take too long here because we want to keep some time for questions. But it looks like renewable energy in city buildings and facilities is winning right now. With energy efficiency in city buildings and facilities, I think you stacked the deck here, Bob, as number 2, and then followed by electric vehicles for city fleet. Excellent. All right. Let's see, I think that's all the questions we have, Bob? Yes. Okay, excellent, thank you. All right, with that, well, let's go ahead and transition to our Q&A session. For those of you that are attending via Zoom, please use the Q&A feature and go ahead and submit your questions. We'll write those down, and I'll ask those questions of the panel after we get through a few audience questions.
Okay. Yeah, my name is Tom Poole. I'm a full-time resident here. I moved down here from Long Island, New York. And when I got here, I was amazed that the Sunshine State had no solar, whereas Long Island is loaded with it. All the parking lots have solar on them for the Long Island Railroad. You have solar everywhere. And I put solar on my house there. The system cost me $24,000. 6 weeks after I installed it, I got a $14,000 check from the lighting company, and I got another $10,000 in tax savings from both federal and state taxes. So the system cost me about $4,500 out of pocket, and my return on investment was about 4 years. Now, why don't we do that in Florida? What can we do to get the legislature to implement some of these types of savings for the residents and businesses here in Florida? You know, it just, I think we need to figure out how we do this at a cost savings to people similar to what they have in some northern states, which are, I mean, they're outdoing Florida. I know one of these things said Florida's number 3 in solar, but I don't see it driving around like I do up north. So I'm, you know, in Massachusetts, you go along the Mass Pike, and there's solar everywhere along. They power everything from these solar panels. You don't see that anywhere down here, not like you have up north. So we need to figure out how we can get the legislature, or whatever it takes, to implement some savings and get this thing going here in Florida. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anybody want to take that question? It was kind of a comment, but anybody want to?
I think what I would just
How do we do
add to
it?
that is we need to be vocal with our elected representatives. In Florida, there's a lot of discussion around adaptation, which is relatively new in our state, but there is a lot of conversation on that. There's almost no conversation politically around the mitigation side of this, and it's our responsibility as engaged citizens to communicate with our elected folks about that.
I'll just add to that. I think we need to start with the legislature not preempting local governments from being able to do things to implement renewable energy. I think that's where we start. Unfortunately, our legislature likes to tell local governments what to do. They don't follow their own recommendations with the federal government. So I think we start there, and of course, providing local incentives is another way. And of course, you know, we have LCEC folks here, and there may be opportunities to provide even more incentives within the community, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. Anybody else want to add to that? All right. Yes. Yeah, so the comment was that if we lead by example and provide some wins, show people that it's working, it's giving us a good return on our investment, then people will follow suit. Is that what I'm hearing, Dr. McCabe? Excellent. All right. Yes, sir.
How do you overcome the issue of evolving technology in solar, which is developing so fast that if you say, if I do it now and I waited a year, it would be 2 or 3 times better? What's the economic model that says to overcome that dilemma?
Sounds like a question for Sim.
That's a really good point. But you've got to start somewhere. The changes that we're seeing in the laboratory still have a lag time to get out into the field. So, you know, we've gone from 15% efficient solar panels and it's taken 15 years, and we're now at 21 and 22% efficient solar panels. So if I had waited 10 years to put solar on my house, yes, I would have bought better solar panels. FGCU, in fact, did that when they put in their solar field. And we could have waited and gotten, instead of Mitsubishi panels, Panasonic panels that are so much more efficient. But we would have missed 8 to 10 years of savings. There's an interesting point. One of the impediments that has been here in Florida, sort of speaking to your question as well, is that mounting our panels is a little bit more expensive and takes a little bit more expertise because of anticipated wind loads of 145 miles per hour. That's sort of been a bump in the road. But once you make that investment of putting a structure in place, then the panels themselves are getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. And once you've got the infrastructure set up, then it becomes easy to, and economically feasible, 10 years down the road, to just replace the panels. You've already got the inverters, you've got the support system, you've got the electrical connections already there. So your point is absolutely correct, but you know, if we keep waiting another year, oh, another year it'll be better, you got to jump in the water sometime.
Why can't you build a financial model that demonstrates that exact thing and move it into the public discussion?
That's a great idea. So real quick, I just want to interject with one question from Zoom, and we'll mix these in. The question is, how can we convince Frontline not to cancel insurance for solar on roofs? Who wants to take that one?
My insurer dropped my policy, and I found another insurer. That's the best I can give.
There you go. All right. Yes, sir.
So I think I might have an idea that is kind of a win-win-win. And we were talking about the solar on the roofs. I've got a standing seam roof, but I really don't want to put solar on it because it was really expensive to put up there. It was really hard to get them to do it right. You know, I really had to fight it to get it done right. And so, and you were talking about the one thing that I think is a win-win-win. Let's do solar on the parking lots. Okay, if we do solar on the parking lots, we don't have the wind problem, we don't have the insurance problem, we don't have the federal problem. We can work with our city council, and I think that is a absolute win-win-win. We start, if we're really concerned about the carbon footprint, et cetera, let's do it. We're putting solar panels, they're repairable, they're easily installable, and we can do it locally, and we can lead. So if we want to do this, I went to a meeting somewhat similar to this 7 years ago or something, had the same conversation. We haven't done a thing, ultimately. I mean, a few people have put it on their homes. Let's lead, let's get it done. Let's do it.
Thank you. So I'm just going to ask a quick Zoom question since we had, that was a great comment. Thank you. Does the city council have any specific initiatives regarding renewable energy that are currently, or that they are currently considering? Dana, anybody want to take that one?
Go ahead, sir.
Vice Mayor? Sorry to put you on the spot.
It's not the first time you've done that. Won't be the last, I'm sure. Oops, I'm sorry. Break the microphone. So currently, there are no initiatives that are on the books, but I can tell you that there's a significant amount of interest in renewable energies from several city council members that have either written to me or spoken to me directly about it. Vice Mayor Johnson has been part of this working group, and you showed the slide that shows how his business, his family's business, is led by example. So I know that there's interest in pursuing these projects. one of the missing pieces has also been the city does not have a facilities master plan. And that's another initiative that the city council has said that we need to complete within the next year, couple of years. So that will be on the plate for our budget discussion. As you said, James, earlier, in 2 nights, there will be another town hall meeting. The Sanibel City Council has been holding a series of public meetings, started in February, to complete a strategic planning process. It's really important that people come to that meeting tomorrow because we're at the point where we're developing objectives. City Council and a team of residents have developed 5 strategic goals. One of them is environmental stewardship, another one is infrastructure. And so this plan needs to evolve with community input. So I encourage you to come to that, and hopefully your input will get integrated into the plan and include some of the things we're talking about tonight.
Thank you, Dana. We really appreciate you being here tonight. All right. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Can I,
Right there.
before I yield
Oh, yeah.
the microphone, I know that we're talking about the city, and I know that Bob's slides showed initiatives that the city can take. But I just also want to make a comment that we've seen where businesses have been at the lead of this as well. And there are many properties, residential properties on the island that also can begin this transformation of solar use or renewable energy on their own properties. So the city has a process that we have to go through, and we have to appropriate money in order to get that off the ground. But I encourage all of you to think about your businesses and your own properties to see how can you make an impact. Start working with LCEC, who's here today, complete an energy audit, and then move forward.
Excellent. Thank you. Is that Lyman?
Hi, Lyman Welch. I have a question. I think it's great everyone can come out to this town hall meeting on Wednesday, and we're saying a strategic plan for the city, what's to be done the next 5-10 years. And if people come out and say they support renewable energy and solar, then maybe that gets on the agenda, and instead of having nothing going on, we just heard for the city manager, nothing's happening right now, maybe the city will change its mind and make something happen. So I'm wondering, from the working group that put forward some plans in March, what is most important for the city to do right now? Should it be doing an audit, more studying of current practices and what needs to be improved? We heard about this master plan that for facilities, and maybe that could be part of it, but is that study and auditing the most important next thing to be done? Or are there actual projects that should be implemented right now that we know, I don't know, maybe changing light bulbs around or putting in solar panels on the school or something like that? Are there actual projects that can be implemented? So is it study or projects? Where is the recommendation for what needs to be done next? What's the #1 priority? If I go to the town hall and say, this is the next thing the city needs to do, what would you say that is?
Yeah, and I had a slide up earlier that listed the initial recommendations from the working group. And they really are a starting place, which is let's establish a priority that we say that we recognize in our resiliency planning, we need to consider mitigation and energy use practices. And then we need data. We need to understand if we're going to spend taxpayer money on projects, where are we going to have the most productive investments? I'd like to think that the time frame from gathering the data to then identifying things that we can begin to do for the city can be narrow. But as Dana pointed out, there's many things that we can do throughout the community. So, the fact that the chamber's sponsoring this is an implied message that this is an opportunity for businesses. We can create a solar co-op on Sanibel for homeowners who are looking for help and cost savings in putting solar on their own home, and facilitate an expansion of rooftop solar. So there's a number of different things that we can do, but we want to have sort of a comprehensive empirical starting point, and that's why we're recommending the energy audit and the greenhouse gas inventory studies as a starting place.
Looks like Dana's standing up there. You want to make a comment?
And thanks for your question. It's a good one, and it is a combination of both. And I walked City Hall with our facilities staff a couple of weeks ago, and they're starting the process to convert incandescent lights in council chamber to LED lights. Now, we're doing this without an energy audit, but we know that there'll be an energy reduction, but we also are worried about the lighting in the room as well. And that will increase efficiency within the lighting. So it is a combination of both. The energy audit, we are working to start the energy audit with LCEC, but also the greenhouse gas emissions study is a natural follow-up to the energy audit.
Thanks, Dan. I have a quick Zoom question, and then we'll take an audience question. Does anyone else besides Island Inn use geothermal? What are the pros and cons? Any geothermal experts here on the panel?
No, Sim, you can say
I
much
was
more about it.
pointing, Mark and I did.
Oh, Mark.
We worked together on a geothermal project. Geothermal can work very well. It is awesome at heating. It's not so good with cooling.
In this area.
In this part of the world. You need a temperature difference between, you have to dump the heat from the building somewhere. And unless you drill a relatively deep well here on the island, the shallow groundwater during the summer, during your maximum heating season, is already 85, 90 degrees. So your ability or the efficiency of the geothermal system isn't as great. It's a wonderful technology, and if we're willing to drill a deeper well, then there's potential.
Thank you. You got a question back there in the yellow?
Hi. So my name's Jennifer Scateri, and I have an electric vehicle. It's almost impossible to charge on the island. The 2 Tesla chargers were down all season. The new bank has charging, but I see people come on the island and they're like backed up to charge. That seems to me such a simple solution. And, I just even Googled it. It's, if somebody wants to come on the island, it should just pop up that there's all sorts of chargers all over the island. So to me, that seems like a really easy solution to draw people on the island that aren't emitting exhaust, sitting in traffic, and also people that live on the island. So,
Thank you. It sounds like a great opportunity for a public-private partnership.
Yeah, we're actually working, is this on? Hello?
You're live, yeah. You're
Okay,
good.
great. With a company called Carbon Solutions Group at the Chamber, and we are still in the planning phases with them. They basically operate a network of chargers, and for both Tesla and other electric vehicles as well. And once we get a pilot program established with them, we'll be rolling that out to businesses and shopping centers throughout the island. But we really want to figure that out pretty quickly here.
Yeah.
And are hoping to be one of the first on the island at the Chamber.
so that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I just want to throw in one quick Zoom since this is near and dear to my heart here. Changing Florida's laws on third-party financing for renewable electricity would help nonprofits like schools, city governments, and churches. Is there any hope of this? And I can tell you firsthand, we're looking at putting solar on our new headquarters remodel building where the Nature Center is located today on Sandcap Road. And we're looking at a return on investment over 14 years because without the tax incentives, it makes the return on investment quite a long time. So we would certainly support that. Does anybody have any insight?
Well, I'll just say that Solar United Neighbors, which is a really great organization, if you're thinking about solar yourself, they have a lot of great resources. It's definitely on the top of their legislative priorities. They actually had someone putting forward a bill in last year's legislation session that never even made it to committee. But it's something that we do need to do in this state, and it'd be another great example of if you wanted to communicate to your elected officials that this is an important priority. The Environmental Defense Fund in Florida is also focused on this as a legislative priority.
Yes, sir.
Stephen Lodwick here, resident and business owner. First off, thank you very much for the time that the panel's spent here tonight and for all of us. So really appreciate volunteering and the time that you guys have taken. A couple comments that I just wanted to make real quick. Number one is when we go back to James, you presented the slides originally that talked about the working group and the goals of the working group. And there were kind of three things on there. And one of the things, like the operative word that I really saw missing from those set of goals were as a catalyst, as an action-oriented group that really helps bring some sort of renewable energy source here to the residents, to businesses. So to me, I really saw that as, okay, what action can I take both as an owner as a residence, as a business owner here, and what can this working group help me and really our community in terms of acting as a catalyst. So I really encourage you guys to take a look at those goals and really look at where can we be a catalyst in that. So that's one real quick comment. I think there was a mention here, we didn't want to be here 7 years from now saying, hey, what did we have an opportunity but really didn't take advantage of. So on that note, in terms of a catalyst, one of the things that I think is pretty daunting or intimidating is really how we can establish renewables at our residence, in our businesses here that are unique to Sanibel and Captiva. So a couple of them have been mentioned. One of the ones that is quite frustrating is that LCEC doesn't have an established plan for tiered rates at night, for example, when the cost of production, the demand curves are very low. It's effectively free energy at night when we can charge our batteries on my electric vehicle, when we have battery backups and various other things. So really working as a group to help LCEC establish programs like that that are essentially free, when energy use is low. Another unique one I heard about insurance here. Another one is all of the insurance providers, whether it's Frontline or any of the wind carriers, are requiring us to replace roofs way before their time is up. So it's 10 years, 15 years, which is far lower than what the actual time that these solar panels, the lifespan of these solar panels. So really, this is a unique problem in here at Sanibel, Captiva, Southwest Florida. So acting as a catalyst to helping us through those unique problems that might be more prominent here, might make it more or less intimidating for us as owners of businesses, of residents, to really put solar and renewables at our homes. So, thank you.
Excellent. Thank you for those comments. Let's see. Yes, sir.
So I mentioned about putting the solar in the parking lots, and we were talking about other governments and getting studies, et cetera. I think we have an excellent opportunity here to talk with Bailey's. We know how much sun they get. We know what we have them as a study that we know how much electricity we're going to get generated, how many watts. Okay, so then it's just a matter of if I put a solar panel on some type of a aluminum structure or something in a parking lot, what's that going to cost and what's the payback going to be? And I mean, I think it's that simple. You get a structural engineer to make some calculations and design a structure. You find out what that's going to cost. We know much how the panels cost. We know much how electricity it's going to generate, and we figure out what the payback is. I got a feeling the payback's going to be less than 5 years. So, and if it's less than 5 years, and maybe if it's 3 years, people are going to adopt it right away because it's going to be a win-win. I mean, you're going to be saving money by doing it. And the other thing is, if residents could have, it's a developed area type of problem because, I know the problems that I had with my roof and I don't want to put them on there. And I'm hearing other people have insurance problems, and I also know about the problem where the insurance companies make you replace your roof. Well, you can't put, if you have the panels on there, you're gonna have to take the panels off. I mean, it's gonna be a nightmare. So we've got to come up with a way to, in the residences, find a way that we can have, for example, I have a seawall. If I could put those panels next to my seawall faces south. If I could put those panels next to the seawall at a reasonable, fairly low, because I can, that would give me the opportunity to generate the electricity to power the house, to get rid of the carbon, reduce the carbon footprint. And it's a developed area problem there. Probably, I'm not sure how the city looks at that. I mean, I guess the rain's gonna go over the panel, so it's not impermeable. So it's really, I don't know, those are my ideas. I think if we could do that, I'd put it in tomorrow. So.
Yeah, you raised some really good points, and I think from a planning standpoint, that we would have to think about that from the city of Sanibel. Of course, there are restrictions on development area and things like that, but in areas where we have, impervious surfaces like pavements and concretes and things like that, those seem like ideal locations for these. I think they would be accessory structures, but finding some way to help support and facilitate that through the city would, I think, be helpful. So maybe that's something that one of you can bring up during the strategic planning discussion on Wednesday with the city of Sanibel. I think that would be great. Any other questions? Yes, Wendy.
I have read about integrated solar roofs where the voltaic cells, I guess, are integrated in some way into the roofing materials. What do you know about that? How expensive is it, and how effective is it, and how common is it?
Tesla has a system, something like 15 to 20% of the shingles, they call them, on the roof are solar panels. We just did a theoretical evaluation of a new community in Estero called Wild Blue, 1,100 homes going in. So we actually contacted a number of solar providers, including Tesla. They estimated something like, depending on whether you're going to get 5 kilowatts or 10 kilowatts of power on the house. 5 kilowatts is probably plenty for a normal sized house, but for a bigger house, 10 kilowatts, something on the order between $20,000 to $35,000, including Tesla Powerwall battery. That's before incentives. So, and these shingles, as they call them, are actually structurally stronger than lots of other typical tile roofs, for example. So they're pushing this in a big way. They want to get into this market. Can we convince people to go away from the Mediterranean-style tile roof to something that looks different? Obviously, the metal roof with standing seams is clearly a superior roof. And I don't know if you've seen this, but they've actually upgraded clips for the standing seam roofs to make solar installation much stronger and much easier. That's within the last 5 to 7 years. So there's a lot of opportunity for different roof ideas. And some of it is just aesthetics, right? Why do we have to look like we're in Naples, Italy if we're in Naples, Florida? Especially with homeowners associations where you've got this uniformity of design, that can be a real impediment. But again, these are things that clearly can be worked on, and the overwhelming advantages that we're seeing in terms of cost savings, et cetera, makes a really strong argument. Who do I talk to is my normal question. How do I get in the room with people who make those decisions? How do we talk to people and change their minds? But yeah, ideas like that are proliferating.
Thanks, Sam. Yeah, so, go ahead, John.
Yes.
Excellent, thank you. All right, one quick Zoom, and then I think we're going to take one more minute, and then we'll wrap it up. But can you get a show of hands for those people thinking of installing solar? All right, show of hands. All right, that's fantastic, great. And it says maybe an island discount question mark here. So, maybe we can buy in bulk. And I know, John, Dr. McCabe put together a group of folks to get solar on the island. So you can buy in bulk. All right, any last questions from the audience? All right. No? All right, so I'll ask one more Zoom. All right, last Zoom question. The most effective way to change behavior is through price signals. What is your opinion of a carbon tax?
It's been demonstrated pretty thoroughly as being one of the most effective ways to cut emissions, and it's a market-based solution. It actually has quite a bit of support on both sides of the aisle. I think it's, in fact, somebody won a Nobel Prize demonstrating its effectiveness. So I think
Excellent.
It's a good idea.
Thank you,
Has
Bob.
to be done well.
Excellent. Well, thank you all for attending.